This is such a big thing, right?
Thank you.
Oh, come on, Jim. Good morning, Colin.
Morning.
Thank you very much for coming on the show.
morning.
Fantastic. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for-
I wanted to be kind of businesslike.
Can I see the other gift?
Hello and welcome to Qatar's first sports podcast, In the Game. I'm your host, Steve Mackey, and we can't wait to introduce you to everything that is sports here in Qatar and afar. We're going to be bringing you personalities, company owners, institutions, individuals that are making a real difference. So, with us, enjoy the journey.
It's fun, man. Sports is fun.
Everyone, thank you for listening. Please send us your feedback on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And don't forget to review us on your favorite podcast app.
Hello and welcome to In the Game, Qatar's first sports podcast. Today is, as always, a very special evening. And today we have someone all the way from Boston. And Jack, you'll do the better one. You introduce yourself. You tell us what you're involved in.
I'll talk about the stuff I'm legally involved in now. Hello, everybody. My name's Jacques. Like Steve said, I live outside of Boston, Massachusetts right now. I've spent 20 years in Los Angeles, and by no fault of my own, a few years back, because of my wife's profession, we wound up in Qatar. And I'll tell you really quickly, Steve, when my wife got the job offer, she said to me, "What do you think about us moving to Qatar for a few years?" And I said, "I've always dreamt of living in a place I can't find on a map." And I had never heard of it. And so the first thing that I did is I Googled Qatar hockey, because I've played hockey since I was 4 years old. And it didn't have to be good hockey. It didn't have to be organized. I just needed to know there's a rink I could go once a week and just skate. And there was. So I said, yeah, let's do this. And we went from not knowing about Qatar to finding, I don't want to over romanticize it, but almost an oasis that's beyond a home, away from home, that we've left full time a few years ago. But as you yourself, with your journey back and forth from Qatar to the homeland, Steve, I don't think you ever really leave Qatar. I don't think you ever really leave the people and the friendships and just it, like I said, we've never really left.
It is a special place, but tell us why you've got this love affair with sports. It's like, tell us, let's go back in time and let's see how you got involved in this wonderful world of sports.
If you know anything about the city of Boston, you know in the 70s it was very segregated. There was an Irish community in South Boston that was just walled off. The North End was all Italian. A city just outside, just where Harvard is, a city called Somerville, it's all Portuguese. Everybody has their own neighborhood, and you stay in your own neighborhood, except and there's a big Catholic community, there's a big Jewish community, there's a big, Protestant, community. But all of that goes away when it comes to sports. And the biggest religion in the city of Boston is sports. It's the baseball team. It is, and even when the basketball team was doing horrible, it was a packed stadium every night. And the hockey team, the Boston Bruins, it had decades of futility that you couldn't get a seat in there if you tried. There's a big college hockey scene there. The biggest religion in the city of Boston is sports. And all the, on a Wednesday afternoon, you wouldn't see an Irish guy in 1970 hanging out in the North End if his life depended on it. But here they are Thursday night sitting next to each other at a Boston Celtic game, hugging each other when Larry Bird hits a three-point shot. It is a bonding thing. There's many moments, specifically in Boston sports, where where you were when this event happened or that event happened. Like 50 years later, you'll go into the corner pub, Steve, and there are grown men still weeping over a drop fly ball in the 1976 World Series, or just strangers fighting with each other who gets to buy the next round because they're reliving a Red Sox victory 20 years earlier and stuff like that. I grew up just north of Boston in a suburb. When I was I played hockey. My mom was the hockey nut. My dad was from another part of the country. He was, he wasn't a sports guy. We'll just put it like that. My mom was a sports nut. My mom was one of 6 children. Her oldest brother was a boxer. He was a local hero on the football field. He still to this day, 60 years later, holds some of the high school basketball records. My mom's dad, what's a nice way of saying complete degenerate alcoholic gambler? I guess that's it. And so my mom's world was sports. So I come along and I don't remember, this is the honest truth, Steve, I don't remember when I started playing hockey. It was just my life. My dad decided when I was 6, he didn't want to be a dad and have kids, and he took off, and that was fine. And so I ended up getting lost in a world of superheroes and hockey. The Boston Bruins were my entire life. I didn't just watch every game. I listened to the radio. I looked at every hockey magazine. I mean, I would just look at these pictures, and just when I was out in the driveway, playing street hockey, my mind was just making sure I looked like that guy in that picture. My stick was curved this way. My elbow was this way. I mean, I truly got lost in a world of sports. My uncle, my dad, my mom's older brother, who was a sports legend on the local level, I spent every other weekend with him. Because of his father being a degenerate gambler, my uncle never gambled. My uncle, however, was a very big gentleman. We're talking 6'2", 6'3". His shoulders were as wide as he was tall. I don't want to say he was the guy who came and collected the money after the football games if your team lost. But my uncle was a guy who came and collected the money after football game. So I'd be like 7, 8 years old driving in his car going from stop to stop on a Sunday night after the NFL games are over, and him just having a wad of cash, driving to somebody's house saying, I'll be back in 20 minutes. And it's like, so that was my world. Now, let me tell you, in all honesty, you have never met a worse hockey player in your life, Steve. I was the worst of the worst. I lived for it. I loved it. But from age 4 to age 14, 15, I was the worst player on the worst team in a town that hockey was the only thing that mattered. Football, the high school football team didn't matter. Track team didn't matter. Basketball didn't matter. The only thing that mattered in this town was hockey. Nobody loved it more. Nobody sucked more at it. And then when I was like 14, 15, I got into the martial arts, and I never had a growth spurt. I'm when people say, how tall are you? I say, how short am I, do you mean? Because I'm 5'7", which was fine in hockey back then. But the martial arts, I just started to get really good at hockey because I now understood leverage. And in hockey, you don't have to be the biggest guy in front of the net. You just have to screen the goalie so he can't see the shot coming. And if you got a great center of gravity, if you actually know how to use leverage to use a bigger guy's size against them, especially in the corners and in front of the net and that stuff, I never really got good as so far as I was a great skater. I was a great shooter. I was a very good passer, and I was an asshole. And I grew up in an era of hockey where fighting was just part of the game. And for every goal I scored, I was in 2 fights. And again, I wasn't the best fighter. As one of my coaches said, when I was playing junior hockey in high school, he's never seen anybody break more knuckles with their forehead than me. As far as a fighter, I guess my best skill is I can take a punch. 7 nose breaks, 400 stitches later, blind in one eye. I still love it. Oh yeah. It's like if I'm looking outside, I'm not legally blind in it, but I'm mostly blind in one eye. The pupil doesn't dilate. You know,
Right.
I got hit with a puck in the eye, but I've had 7 nose breaks, half a dozen diagnosed concussions, and again, between the martial arts and hockey, I wouldn't change it. When I got into the martial arts, and again, it's pre MMA. I mean, there were, you know, in the mid '80s, it was just, you know, just different styles, and we would get together and have our own little tournaments, kind of an unofficial fight club. But when I got into jiu-jitsu, when I got into Muay Thai, I learned, you know, in the corners, hey, God gave you elbows for a reason. You know, I got really good at grappling, which again,
That was useful.
it was used to, and hockey. There's a strategy to fighting. There really is. You know, one of the things I learned is I can really get under the skin of the other team's really good goal scorer, or I can get under the skin of the other team's goalie and throw him off the game. I can get under this. I was literally, and I'm happy. You know, if you are willing to, you know, offer up your pound of flesh, you're going to get a couple penalties. You know, you're going to get power plays. You know, I was really good at getting people to take a swing at me and then have to go sit in the penalty box, and the good guys on my team would score on a power play. So
That's the thing when people say, just kind of keep an eye on your competitor, keep an eye, and it's like if you all of a sudden have to concentrate on your competitor, you're not focusing on your game. Distract them, do whatever you can to get their mind off what they've got to do, and you've won the game. Let the other teammates do the rest.
It's funny because if there's a Hall of Fame for trash talking, dude, I'm a first ballot Hall of Famer. When I get to Qatar, it's very funny because I'm playing in this league, and I want to back up for a second. When my wife got the offer to go to Qatar and I found out there was a rink, I did a Google search, and it turns out that there's a league there. There's a league, organized, stats, official teams, and there's also friendlies, just pick up. Sign up, anybody can play. Everybody throws their stick in the middle of the rink, and one guy just divides a stick up. And I might be on your team this week, Steve, and next week I might be against you. That community was so welcoming, that hockey community. That league was so well organized. I actually dropped about 45, 50 pounds to get in shape to be able to play on one of the good teams. And if I played the best game I played in 20 years, I mean, I worked my butt off. I was just sweating bullets. If I was lucky, I was the 8th best player on my team that day. I mean, I was just good enough to get to play with the really good guys. And again, when you walked into the locker room, you were walking into the UN. There's 2 guys from Finland. There's a Romanian. There's a Russian. There's a couple Swedes. There's 6 guys from Canada. And it didn't matter if you're tall or short, if you're 45, if you're 23. It was such a welcoming community. Hockey, like being in Boston, where sports was the great equalizer, the great uniter. My love for Qatar is largely based on the brotherhood that I developed with these, and there was a lot of women in that league too. You know, it's not generally a co-ed sport, you know, but there was, and I'm telling you, Steve, it was special. And the College of the North Atlantic started the Qatari League like 40 years ago. But now I'm playing in this league, and I'm playing the Qatari national team. We were playing them once every 2 weeks. These are Qatari kids who each one of them was a great athlete. I mean, each one of them, hands down, they're young, they're in the prime of their life. They're much better athletes than the team that I'm playing on. Much better athletes. I mean, you know, my guys are 20 pounds overweight and 35 to 45 years old. These are 20-year-old kids just in their prime. However, these Canadian guys, they have forgotten more than the Qatari kids are ever going to know. And we would win every game by 6 or 7 goals. They got better over the years. But the biggest thing is these Qatari kids weren't used to this short, you know, American guy who just would never shut the F up. Just right the whole way up the ice. I'd be telling them what they're doing wrong, you know, and it's a one-on-one, and they're coming down, and I'm broadcasting the game like an announcer. I'm like, oh, he's trying to go outside. Oh, he's going to try to go up the boards, and he's going to get, yep, he got pinched off in the boards. Oh, look at that, folks. He got an elbow in the face for no reason because the ref wasn't looking. And these kids just, and I would look over, and I would play pickup. I would play shinny with their coach. He would play, and oh my God, he just loved it. He's like, you just get them so riled up. They just look at each other and they're like, I don't want to play against him. I mean, they're all better athletes. They're stronger, they're faster, but they just, don't know all the tricks that, old guys like me have up their sleeve. And they just, the Qatari culture isn't based on sitcom dialogue. The other thing about Boston, you look at the 30 biggest comedians over the last 40 years, half of them come from Boston. Half of the people who write sitcoms come from Boston. There's a language that you speak in hockey, and there's a language that you speak in Boston where it's ironic sarcasm to an extreme level. You talk to your friends and you talk to your teammates worse than you would talk to an enemy at war. It's like, it is just if you don't have a rhino thick skin, you ain't gonna survive very long. But it comes from a good place. And I ended up having the honor of being asked to come to Qatari practices and work with the kids on certain things. Their coach was a gifted goal scorer from the Romanian league. Their two assistants were from the Finnish elite league when I was there. Like I said, there was so many better players from the elite league that I got to play with. But one of the things that their coach liked is, certain things that my game was akin to. I'm really great at getting in front of the net and you not being able to move me. You cannot move me. And again, it comes back to my martial arts background where I learned about taking a fight to the ground, using leverage, being able to use a taller person's size against me. I would take what most people consider, my opponent's best asset, and I would make it a liability. Like I said, I'm not fast. I don't have a great shot, but I can irritate the snot out of you. And I'm going to tear you down so much that, I don't care if you're 40, you're going to call your mom on the car ride home and talk about the guy who was bullying you out on the ice.
Where you said that you weren't very good at, in the early days, you weren't a great player. And it's funny you should say that you put all your sticks in the middle and then they split them up. So you weren't picking the next person to go on your team, right? Yep. When that horrible feeling when nobody's picked you and you're the last one to be picked.
Yeah, well, that was as a kid, and as a kid growing up, we hockey's an expensive sport, and, we didn't have money for good equipment. And like I said, I didn't have a dad to take me to the rinks and stuff like that. But I got better over the years, and it's fun when you have thing about dividing by sticks, you don't know whose stick is who.
Yeah.
So you could be on a team, and every now and then it might be a little lopsided, so you would switch one or two players. But the other fun thing is, what's fun about that, Steve, is you go to the bench, and who's ever up next goes out next. So so if hockey, one shift you might be playing lefty. The next shift you might be playing right wing. The next shift you could be center. It's like you have to be able to play all the positions. So if it's a soccer thing, you might be a striker, one shift, and then the next shift out there, you're a defender. So what's really great about that is you have to have a well-rounded game, to be able to. And if you don't have a well-rounded game, situations like that help you become well-rounded.
I used to play. I did play ice hockey and roller hockey. I loved it. It was just fantastic. It was just you had to be really hard. I remember playing. We used to call it bulldog, where you had to get to one person would stand in the middle, and you'd all have to skate all the way through until he. And in the end, you could have been there last, and you had to get through 20 people. It was crazy. Yep. The one thing I played normal hockey, field hockey, and you had to be crazy to play these games, because that puck, that ball was going to come at you for not 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. And you were throwing your body right in front of it. It didn't matter whether it's your head. It was like you were just going to try and save that goal.
Well, and in ice hockey and the NHL, the best guys are shooting at 100 miles an hour. So you're taking a couple levels down. You're still talking. I mean, I've played with guys who are shooting at, 75 to 90 miles an hour, and it's 3 inches around, 1 inch thick, vulcanized rubber. I mean, it doesn't have to be moving fast for you to feel it. But again, it's not for everybody. Well, here's the funny thing, that the camaraderie that Qatari league had, even in the most competitive games, there was never any penalties called. Like guys would be rough with each other when it's time to be rough, but there was never anything dirty. There was never, I grew up in a different era. I grew up in the 70s and the 80s where, you were carrying a lethal weapon. That stick was a lethal weapon. But you would play in this league, and sure, but accidentally, 2 guys are reaching for the puck at the same time, it's going to come up and hit you. It's just part of the game. That's it.
I've had a couple hit my jaw where you've gone down and you're virtually reaching out, and then all of a sudden you see that stick coming up your arm and it hits you right in the side of the face. And one of the other things, when you said the 70s, 80s, when did the full face mask come in, where the helmet was part and you had the front as well? Because again, in the early days, that must have been lethal.
Well, you, my friend Steve, are talking to a dinosaur. I am one of maybe a handful of people on this planet who are not smart enough to wear a face mask yet. I mean, most of my teeth are fake. But I haven't played, because of COVID. I haven't been on the ice in a bit. When I go back, I'm actually going to try, at my tender age of 51, to try to wear a face mask. So I grew up right in the era where face masks started. So when I was in high school in the mid 80s, if you played high school hockey, you had to wear a full face mask. There was these other leagues called junior hockey where you didn't have to wear a face mask. In high school hockey, you can't fight and you have to wear a face mask. I'm not good enough. I can't skate with those guys. So I ended up playing, it's ironic, it's a higher league. So even though I didn't have the great skill set to stand out in high school hockey, because I could fight, because, I'm a really good passer, I really know the game well, I was able to play in a better league, but I haven't worn a face mask. Probably when I had to wear a face mask as a kid, but by age 14, I stopped wearing a face mask. But that's around the time it started. So if I went to a hockey game, if my uncle took me into a hockey game in 1976, you might have 8 or 10 guys who have helmets on. And the helmets back then, Steve, you might as well just get like a Tupperware bowl and put it on your head and strap it. I mean, it was not very protective at all. Face masks started to come in college hockey in the late 70s, but it didn't really come into the NHL to the late 80s, early 90s. And I think as late as the guy's name is Craig McTavish, played for the Edmonton Oilers. I think officially he's the last guy to play an NHL game without a helmet, and that's like 91, 92. But just one generation removed. If you see hockey footage from the mid to late 60s, goalies didn't have masks. Goalies didn't have masks back then. No. And in 1965, a guy named Brett Hull, he could shoot a slap shot 120 miles an hour. And you're talking guys not wearing. I do not know how more goalies haven't died in the game. I don't, Steve. I don't know. But now, but the same thing in Qatar, I would play a couple tournaments where you had to, so I would have to borrow somebody's helmet with a face mask, and I felt like claustrophobic. But it was one of those things where I think I might have even been the only guy on the ice in 2016 playing in the Qatar League without a face mask. And people would just be shocked because of the way I played by mouthing off. I was the most punchable guy. So it wasn't a good combination.
And I'm going to I'm going to go in a different direction now. I see on the back of the wall, and we had a little bit of a conversation beforehand, and I see on the back of the wall it said, "Don't be afraid of success."
Oh,
And it's like, and that to me really, a wonderful statement, a wonderful statement. With all of your stuff with the sports, has it taught you? Because obviously, you had no fear playing those games, doing the things that you've done, being the type of character that you were. You couldn't have had any fear. Is that why you're so, and you're going to, please, now we're going to go on and we're going to talk about how you've gone on into business and you've been successful from a sports perspective and how you're doing things on a global basis now from a sports perspective. That statement on the wall, is that because of everything that you've learned when you began with hockey?
I don't think I've ever played a game. I've been in a band for 30 years. I don't think I've done a show. I've done stand-up comedy. I don't think I've got up on stage. I've been in business. I don't think I've gone to pick up the phone call, Steve, without being afraid, without having the butterflies. And if there's a lot of these things, look, if you're going to go parachuting, even if it's your 1,000th jump, if you don't have butterflies, there's something wrong with you. You know what I mean?
I'm so glad you said. I'm so glad.
But you have to jump out that door, and you have to do it. And so when I pick up the phone, and I'm calling somebody, if I'm going to the rink, it's fine to have those and that fear, that anxiety, it's just energy, and you take that energy and you focus it. You take your fear and you make it your opponent's fear. If you're getting on a mic and you're ready to do stand up, you got to swing the pendulum the other way. You have to take that nervous energy, and somewhere between walking up to the mic and telling your first joke, you got to turn that nervous energy into bravado. You cannot be afraid of succeeding. Unless you put yourself out there, you won't. Wayne Gretzky, the second greatest hockey player of all time, he has said, you will never score on 100% of the shots you don't take. And we'll talk about it in a second, but I accidentally, a really great friend of mine who I'm developing a new TV show with, I absolutely love her to death. She, a decade ago, has said, my business philosophy is I'm the embodiment of Forrest Gump. I have lucked into a lot of situations, which, a good athlete makes her own luck. A good business person makes her own luck. And when an opportunity presents itself, I'm either not afraid or not smart enough to pick up the phone. And truly, I was accidentally, and we talked about it before the podcast, I accidentally managed a household name artist back in 2004. I had never done it. Circumstances like pushed me in this direction. And we were trying to promote an album that this artist had. He's a big flag waver, which meant something different in 2004. And I wanted him to do some national anthems because they're on national TV. There's 80,000 people in the stage. I had no contacts in sports, none. And we had done 4 Monday Night Football games in a span of 5 weeks. And Monday Night Football here is one of the highest watched shows, Steve. You're talking Miami Dolphins have 80,000 people in the stadium. You're talking 25 million people at home watching this. And after like the third or fourth thing, he says, I've had bigger managers. No insulting me. He's like, I've had the biggest managers, the biggest agent. I'm on this TV show. None of them have got me these gigs. How are you doing this? And I said, here's my trick. I pick up the phone and say, hey, do you want this guy to come sing your anthem? And he's like, that's it? I'm like, that's it. I said, all your agents and managers, because of who you are, they sit at their office and they wait for the phone calls to come in. They wait for the offers to come in. I pick up the phone and make the calls going out. So I had no contact with the NFL. I would just Google, the Kansas City Chiefs, this person. And then I called, and then that team would call me back and say, oh, we booked him to do the anthem. This is great. We actually found a little more money, and we have money to do a halftime show. Can you get me a band? I never worked with these household bands, but I worked on the low end of music and in the music video world. I ran a company that did editing. So I had some phone numbers for some labels. I just called and said, hey, I'm working with the Kansas City Chiefs. They're looking for a halftime band. Who do you have on the road who has an open date? And it was that first time it happened, it was 100 phone calls. Maybe it was 200 phone calls. And then it came together, Steve. The next year, that person from Kansas City went to work for a different team. And the person who came in and filled that person's spot looked at the notes from the year before and says, oh, I see Bobby from last year used you to book this person. Who can you bring me this year? And that person who went to the other team said, I'm not with Kansas City. I'm now with the 49ers. We had a great time working together last year. Who can you bring me here? And all of a sudden, I go from worshiping, NFL football and loving it to working 5 or 6 games a year with artists that, oh my God, I mean, how many Cheap Trick albums have I bought over the year? And now I booked them to do a halftime show with the Indianapolis Colts, and I'm getting paid to work with a band I love at a football game, which is my favorite sport to watch. I love watching football, but I live for playing hockey. Hockey's more fun to play than it is to watch for me.
You've said some really big things there, like the but you've got to have that buzz. You've got to have the kind of the nervousness, but you've got to feel the fear and do it. If as soon as you feel that fear, there's no other way except doing it. Just jump in, pushing yourself into it. How and again, I'm appreciating the stuff you said, especially with the phone, making phone calls, because making phone calls is not easy. It's like you've got to build yourself up to it. But as soon as you get over the first few, you're on it. Then it's kind of easier to make those phone calls.
I don't care what profession you are. I was talking to a business friend of mine the other day, and a few years older than me, and a real mentor, and he was talking about the movie Jerry Maguire. There's an older character, Jerry Maguire, an old businessman who had a few philosophies, and one of his philosophies was the character's name was Dickie Fox. And one of his philosophies, Steve, was make the calls, make the calls, make the calls. And I've produced some movies. I've developed some TV shows. It's all the same. Producing a TV show is a glorified way of saying salesman, because I have to sell an investor on the project. I have to sell a crew to come work for me. I have to sell talent to come and work with this crew to do it. It's constantly a different form of selling. And you are going to hear 100 no's before you hear one maybe. And you're going to hear a dozen maybes before you hear one, yeah, I think so. And then you're going to hear a half a dozen I think so's before one check goes from this hand to that hand. And it's a war of attrition, and you're going to get your ass kicked. You're going to get knocked down. You're going to be at the precipice of the biggest deal of your life, Steve, and the carpet is going to get pulled out from under you. And it's something I tell my boys all the time. There's a few family philosophies that I have. One of them is never miss an opportunity to help somebody, because volunteering is the most selfish thing you can possibly do. Volunteering and helping somebody is the most selfish thing you can do because of how it makes you feel. The other thing that I tell my sons all the time, you do not lose a fight because you got knocked down. You lost a fight because you didn't get back up.
Oh dear, this is just poetry. This is just brilliant.
And right now I have 3 projects that I've been working all through COVID. All through COVID, I've been working on them, Steve. And I'm such an optimist, but I know one of them is going to go sideways. All 3 might go sideways. At the end of the day, I still got my son's university bills coming up in a few years, and I can't cry over the project that almost happened. If they happen, wonderful. I'm so excited. If they don't happen, crying about it isn't going to solve it. I'm pissed that it's raining. Well, you know what? That's not going to stop it from raining. So, you got to look at what's out the windshield, not in the rearview mirror. And so if you get knocked down, find a way to get back to your feet.
I love your spirit. Your spirit is fantastic. Now, tell us again, you're doing things, you're setting up shows all over the world. What's that? What are you doing on that front?
So again, Qatar, I never left Qatar. I haven't called it home since 2017, and I never left it. And I keep trying to find ways to go back. One way that I've got to go back several times since I left is my hair's halfway down my back. I'm a pacifist. I wouldn't pick up a gun if I had to. It's why Batman's my favorite superhero. But I support our military. I wish we lived in a world where we didn't have to have a military. I wish the U.S. would spend what they spend on the military on education. But the point is, we have service people all over the world who are doing things that let me be a pacifist who never have to pick up a gun. And so I met some people I met one man while I was in Qatar. A friend of a friend hooked us up. He, ex-Marine who started working as a civilian 20 years ago in Qatar for Armed Forces Entertainment. It's my friend Dan. Great guy. I mean, truly, I love this guy. He is a brother. I overlook the fact that he's a fan of the Miami Dolphin football team, but hey, nobody's perfect. But he works for Armed Forces Entertainment. And when I left Qatar, we've been on the phone on a constant basis because he books the Goodwill tours to come to the whole region. I think his region stretches from maybe South Korea to Djibouti. But he lived in Bahrain for 8 years, but I think he's been in Qatar for 20 plus years. He is a sports nut. I am a sports nut. And so while we've talked about bringing different kind of entertainment, some of the stuff that we've worked on together is bringing the Big Three basketball team to do a GCC tour. And it was booked through Armed Forces Entertainment. And it was wonderful. You know, we did a game in Abu Dhabi, went to Kuwait and did a few games. And then we did the 2 bases in Qatar. And it's wonderful. These guys, again, when I talk about volunteering being such a selfish thing to do, when you do these military tours, Steve, you're giving yourself. There's not a lot of money in it. You know, they pay to get you to the bases from around the world. Sometimes you sleep on the bases, like in a barracks. Sometimes they put you up in a hotel and then they drive you to the base the next day. You eat in the mess halls with the soldiers. It's not a glamorous thing. And these people are so thankful that you're coming in, doing comedy for them, that you're playing basketball with them. But you also get to walk in their shoes for a day. So one day in Qatar, we spent the day with the bomb fusing to people. And there's a warehouse of every kind of explosive that you can possibly imagine. And you're putting on, you get to put on the body suits and spend a day with the trained attack dogs and stuff like that. So you get to do all. I've never done a tour. I've never worked on somebody with a tour who doesn't instantly ask 2 questions. When you're on the car, going to the airport to go home, Steve, you're asked 2 questions. Where are we going next? And how soon can we get there? It's these things are life-changing. And again, where I'm a sports guy, the next tours we have coming up, we're going to do more Big Three tours when we can tour. We're going to do more WNBA tours. These women in the WNBA, I mean, they're some of the best athletes on the planet, just some of the best athletes on the planet. Most recently, I've come into contact with the Pro Women's Soccer League in the United States, which probably is outside of the national teams at the World Cup, outside of the national teams with the Olympics. These are the best women's soccer players in the world. They're not all American. Again, they're from all over the world.
Yep.
And again, with when I came back to Qatar a couple of years ago with the Big Three, it's so wonderful to work with the military. At the same time, when I got to Qatar, I knew nothing about Qatar. And I didn't know what Sports Day was. And then I come from a city of Boston where, again, the biggest religion is sports. And this country's second biggest non-religious holiday is Sports Day. The world comes to a grinding stop for professional sports, these activities for kids. I mean, it is wonderful that this nation has there's National Day and then there's Sports Days. Those are the 2 biggest holidays Qatar celebrates that aren't on the Muslim calendar. And everybody gets involved. When I tell people, no, it's a real holiday, the banks are shut down. Like, no, you take the day off. It might be a Tuesday, it might be a Wednesday, but Sports Day in Qatar is a very, very special thing. And again, most of the 3 years I was in Qatar, off and on, that's when we would have the big tournaments, and the other teams from, Bahrain would come in, and Dubai would come in, and Kuwait would come in, and we'd have these big national tournaments over at the Bellagio. I absolutely loved it. So now that I'm here and I'm coming back there with events, I want to open it up to everybody. So when I came back with the big three, I called a couple people that I knew in sports. I also just, went on LinkedIn. I went on Google, and I was trying to find out who's associated with basketball. And so I started calling people again in Kuwait, in Abu Dhabi, in Qatar, saying, hey, I'm going to be in town. I'm coming to town with a bunch of ex-NBA guys. We'd like to find a way to do public events. If we're going 17 hours on a plane and we're going to be in your backyard, dealing and having a wonderful time at a Goodwill tour on the base, well, the next day, we'd love to run camps for kids. If the WNBA comes to town, one of the wonderful things about Qatar is that culture is starting to embrace women's sports more.
Yeah, of course.
But nowhere more so than Qatar.
Yeah.
And how wonderful would it be to bring the best women basketball players on the planet are going to be down the street from you, running a camp for girls, talking to girls about, running a camp, running a clinic, and talking about training and diet and what it takes to be. I mean, the pro women basketball players in the WNBA work just as hard, in a lot of cases, harder than the men who make it to the NBA. You know what I mean? Shaq just has to show up and be 6'9" and unmovable. But these women, and much like the guys in the big three that I dealt with, most of these guys were good athletes that weren't great athletes, that trained and made themselves great athletes. Those are the athletes. Pele could never teach you how to be Pele.
Yeah.
Beckham cannot teach you how to be Beckham. That's just talent from another realm or dimension. The players that I like in every sport are the ones who weren't gifted with the size or the strength or the speed, who just have to find a way to outwork you. And so many of these guys that I did this tour with, they're great athletes. I'm not saying they're not great athletes. And again, taking one step back, I had a WNBA tour. Something happened. That tour couldn't happen. I was booked to do this thing, and somebody suggested in basketball here in the WNBA said, why don't you call the big three? I knew nobody in the big three, Steve. I knew it was the second year of the big three. It just started. Again, I just went to LinkedIn and I typed big three, and anybody whose name came up associate with the big three, I sent out a message. This woman named Latasha calls me back. I've never been in a room with a better person than this woman, Latasha. And she's a PR person. She's an agent. She's a manager. She's a mom. She's somebody who will throw herself on a grenade for you, but at the same time, do not be on her bad side. And she says, I can put together a team for you. And I'm like, great. And then she put together this team. We were on the phone every day for 2 months. The first time we met is at JFK Airport in New York, because everybody flew into JFK and then we flew into Qatar together. I do not love a person more than I love this woman. She put this whole thing together. And she didn't just put a team together. She put a team together of some really special guys. Some guys who just, who want to get on a plane and go to the other side of the world and entertain our troops. But guys who, there was one guy, Cook, 7 feet tall, been on the Lakers for a decade. You're not going to meet a softer spoken, gentler person who, as good as he is as a basketball player, he just has that chip where all he really wants to do is coach. And so we're at these bases and we're on one side of the court getting ready to warm up, and he sees guys on the other side of the court, just shooting around. He cannot sit there and focus on getting ready for his game. He has to walk down there and show the guys, okay, your form is good, but if you keep your elbow in, when you're doing this is going to happen. And I would have to get like a hook and drag him back. It's like, Cookie, we need you over here, buddy. He can't not coach. He cannot give of himself. And Latasha put together a team of these just really special people. We went to 7 bases. Each one of those bases, there was a moment where a base commander is pulling me to the side. A staff sergeant is pulling me to the side saying, this is my best day of deployment. I can't thank you enough for doing this. And you're like, no, dude, we're here to thank you. You got this backwards. But we're talking grown people, in tears. And sports has that power. And one of the things that, I want to share, I have access to these talents, be it movie people, be it athletes. I love guitar. I love the culture. I love the people. I am really hoping, and we were pretty close to doing it. It's funny because Steve, you and I, it turns out we have a couple friends in the sports world of guitar. Again, when I was coming to guitar, I didn't know these people. I just said, hey, I'm coming to guitar with the big 3. I got this 2-hour window because once you're on the base, you're on the base and you don't leave. But from going to the airport to going to the base, we're going to stop at the Villaggio and have a bite to eat because I want to show off my rink. I want to show off my hockey players. I want to show off this mall that I spent 2/3 of my waking hours at, with my boys, either at the trampoline, at some of the arcades, the laser tag there. Look, I'm doing an infomercial for Villaggio. But a couple of these people, I'm like, I'm going to be here. I have a small window. I would love you to meet these guys. And let's find a way to bring them back and to do exhibitions, to run camps, to run clinics, to do question and answers, or to just do meet and greets. But these people want to coach. They want to give of themselves. If we want to put something together where they're doing a 3-on-3 game against a national team, great. If we want them to play in a tournament, great. When we would get to the bases, sometimes our guys would just coach, 2 teams from this base or that base are playing against each other. Our guys would coach, 2 of the guys would ref, and there was one guy, Rashid. He literally walks around with a crown on. He wears a crown. He's a character and a half, but he was emceeing and broadcasting the games. He had everybody in tears. I mean, this guy, basketball, he's won an NCAA title. He had a great NBA career, but he missed his calling. This guy should have been a stand-up comic. And that's what I'm really hoping, to build. Something else that you and I talked about. When I was in guitar, I got approached to bring celebrities over to do a couple things. And I'm like, well, let's take it back a step. I met with DFI, the Doha Film Institute. There was a great celebrity procurement company there that I've worked with, a Germany-based company that's been in Doha, I think 12 years like yourself. We brought over an A-list filmmaker who's done, a guy named Bill Fay. He created Legendary Pictures, and we toured the country. We met with the Minister of Economy. We met with DFI. The highlight for me and him, we got to speak at a couple filmmaking classes in Doha. And it was just wonderful, to be able to do that. Well, now I'm coming back to the Regent, to the Comic-Con in Dubai, and it's, with a celebrity band, and they want to come in because I bragged about it so much. It's like, why don't we go and we're right down the street, why don't we go and do something? And the athletes, the same thing. Everybody hears about, it's a special place. And now that's what I'm trying to do. It's like, how do I get to do what I do for the military for the people?
My fingers are well and truly crossed because I know that you're doing so much stuff in the region, and I can't wait to work with you on some of this stuff. I really can. You spoke about the comic thing, and I do want, I know that we spent a lot of time on sports, but I do want to let people know you have I won't say a crazy side to you, but please, can you you got married? What character did you dress up as?
I honestly, love's a special thing, Steve, and there's somebody out there for everybody. And the proof of that is my wife and I, but just going back a step, I don't think there's a picture of me past age 8 without wearing a Batman shirt. I got a couple Batman tattoos. When I was 8 years old and I saw Star Wars, I knew I was going to name my first son Luke. However, I end up marrying a woman who's half Korean. We thought he'd have black hair. Turns out he has blonde hair. So we didn't go with Luke. We ended up going with my favorite superhero, a guy named Dick Grayson, who used to be Robin, but now he's this guy Nightwing. Our other son is named after another sci-fi character. He's named after 2 sci-fi characters. Tristan from one movie, and Tiberius from James T. Kirk. Anyways, my wife gets this job working for a Qatari family, who she misses the 4 girls very, very, very much. But you have to be married to live in Qatar together. My wife and I don't want to say it like, weirdo, hippie, anti-establishment people. But my wife and I are weirdo, hippie, anti-establishment people. So we had 2 beautiful kids. We were together for 10 years. We just didn't, get married. She takes this job. She agrees to the job in New York. They want her to fly right from New York to Qatar. She says, well, she can't. She has to go say goodbye to the boys because they're not going to see mom. They're not going to see mom for a month or so before we get there. And but what really had to happen is she had to come home so we could get married. So my 2 best mates, my goal, I've been on a hockey team with these guys for 20 years at this point. One of them's from Japan, and he's our goalie. And the other one's, a very prominent lawyer in Los Angeles. And one of them went online to get ordained to perform the ceremony. So within 3 days, we put together a wedding. My best man, my buddy John, wore my favorite hockey player's minor league uniform. Like he got the minor league uniform of my favorite player from the 60s. The guy who married me was dressed like a Jedi. I was dressed like Han Solo. And my one son was dressed as the character he's named after, Nightwing, and the other one was dressed as Robin from Batman and Robin. And we lived 5 houses from the beach. We just walked. We literally, people came over to the house. We had some bagels. We had some coffee. We walked down the street. There was, we maybe had like 15, 20 friends who came because it was a last minute thing. Neither one of our families could fly out from Boston in time. It just came together so quick. And then we we walked down to the beach. We did the I do's, took a couple pictures. Then my friend Biff, the Japanese guy who's my goalie, one of the smartest people I've ever been around. He hosted a little party at his house. It was the most sweet, low key, ever. And now so the next day is when I went to the tattoo shop because I fight. And because I do hockey and mixed martial arts, I wouldn't wear jewelry anyways. And so I didn't want to have to take a ring off and on. So I had Green Lantern's power ring tattooed on my ring finger as my wedding ring. So yeah, I have my favorite hockey players' numbers tattooed to my feet. I got a couple Batman, Superman tattoos. I got this. I also have one day my wife jokingly pointed out in a way that a woman will be dead serious that I got other tattoos with past girlfriends and I must have loved them more. So to prove that I love her more than anybody has ever loved a human being, she has a Hello Kitty tattoo on her upper right thigh. I got a tattoo on my upper left thigh, the exact same Hello Kitty tattoo, which by the way, Steve, when you're nooning up in a hockey locker room and people see you after the game and think, wait, was that the guy I was fighting with who elbowed me in the jaw? And he has a Hello Kitty tattoo? It confuses people. It confuses people. But yeah.
How many suits have you got?
How many what?
Suits.
Oh, one. What? I was telling you. I again, honestly, when my dad left when I was a kid, it was the best thing that happened to us. And I fell into a world of hockey and comic books, and I've never come out of it. That is still my world. I will send you a picture, Steve. I'm getting a plaque from a base commander in Kuwait. I didn't think I was getting a plaque. It's usually the players get it. And here I am wearing, there's a football player named Rob Gronkowski who played on the Patriots. Somebody made a Rob Gronkowski Hello Kitty shirt. And here I am wearing a Hello Kitty Gronkowski shirt, shaking hands with a base commander being handed an award. No, but I have one suit. I never wear it. The only reason I have a suit is because of my past as doing MMA, not in an MMA environment, let's say. Being a drummer in a punk band and having a mouth that maybe have spilled over into parking lots. I always keep one suit in case the phrase, "Will the defendant please rise?" might be uttered. And so I get to Qatar and I have that suit and it's packed away, and somebody, a friend or a friend, maybe one of the royals that my wife knew, maybe it was a guy from hockey, somehow I get a phone call from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in Doha wanting me to come in for a meeting. So I'm like, well, I'm going to have to dig out the suit, send it out and get it pressed. I put on the suit because I usually wear comic book stuff or superhero stuff. And my sons at the time didn't own clothes. My sons did not own clothing. Everything they owned was a cowl to shoe superhero outfit, like not a superhero shirt. I mean, full on everything. So my little son, he's 6 at the time, sees me walk out of the bedroom in a suit. His jaw drops and he says, is that your Bruce Wayne costume? And Steve, that's when I knew I made it as a dad. I'm like, you know what? I got this whole thing figured out. And I'm like, yes, I'm going out as Bruce Wayne today. Don't tell anybody that I'm really Batman. Oh, it was just the best. And that did. It opened up this world. Like I said, you've left Qatar and you got pulled back. And we've talked about this before the podcast in the past. You can't explain why you get pulled back, but you do. And although we've left there in 2017, I am so lucky to have got back. Last year, my film mentor, a guy named Bill Fay, we were set to come back and do a movie night. We were coming back with the 300 and the Hangover, some of the movies he produced to show on the bases. We talked to DFI about doing a public forum where, he could show it like locally and do question and answer and all that stuff. I'm still in contact with some of my hockey guys. My goal, one of the goalies, not my goalie, a goalie, his name is Fareed. He's from Montreal. He's been with Al Jazeera for 20 years, I think. I talk to him on a regular basis. My wife still works, and we actually have another place where we've crossed paths. You have friends in the rescue community. My wife works with PAWS. I think it's called PAWS, Qatar Rescue, where every couple months we drive to New York because somebody has flown in with a 3-legged deaf dog or a blind cat with mange. We tend to rescue special needs animals. But since we've been back, I'm going to say 8 or 10 animals from Qatar have been sent to us to find their forever home here. And again, it's the most selfish thing you could do. I mean, these dogs get off a plane scared and confused, and you give them a loving home and you find them their forever home. It's a rewarding thing. My wife is still contacts with her friend Coco, who she worked together with the family. And in 20 years, my wife will still be talking to these people that we were only with for a couple years, but there was this Greek family, on the compound with us, and their daughter's name was Maya. My son was 6. Their daughter was 6. Both have beautiful blonde hair, and we're like, it's kind of funny and also creepy to be talking to the other parents. It's like, man, their kids are going to be gorgeous. And you know what? Let them be kids for the next 20 years first, and then we get there. But still, that dad and I have still stayed in contact. Their family moved back to Greece. That guy, on Thursday night, at least once a month, once every 2 weeks, he would host a party and he was the DJ. And when I say things started around 6, 7 o'clock, they really picked up around 9, 10 o'clock. They didn't end until the sun came up. Like, you'd be down at the pool and you're hearing morning prayer. You know what I mean? You're hearing, because where we lived in Abu Hamur, within probably 1 kilometer to 2 kilometers and 4 directions, there was different mosques. And when you would hear morning prayer, you're like, oh, that's time to go home. let's wrap this up. But they're back in Greece, and their daughter is doing wonderful. The mom is wonderful, and it's nice that we were there for a short period of time. We left as a family in 2017. I luckily, because of my work with my friend Dan and Armed Forces Entertainment, have been back. I'm lucky that I'm coming back with a celebrity band to Dubai in the end of October, and I'm hoping to bring those guys to either one of those guys was in Star Wars, and maybe we'll just come to Doha and do a Star Wars night where you get to watch a movie with the guy who was in Star Wars and ask questions. Maybe we'll do a concert because they're a celebrity, rock band. I'm very much looking forward to coming back there with my filmmaking friend, my basketball, the big three guys. The big three guys, the last day of tour in Qatar, the ringleader of the group with our friend Latasha, we're all sitting there, and he says, next off season, we got to do 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. We'll go on a military tour for 2 weeks, go home for 2 weeks. I'll go on a military tour, and the end of that tour was a little rough because we were sleeping in barracks. It was raining and the roof was leaking. And it's funny because I'm talking, and I think it was Latasha who said, it's like, well, we can't really complain because this is what the guys are going through. We're leaving tomorrow. These guys are going to be deployed here another 2 years. So why don't we just, we're all in this together. And it was a wonderful bonding thing. And like I said, a lot of sports people. I'm friends with some of the same ones. I'm really trying to, hey, I'm coming over there anyways. Or look, they have an off season coming up. You got sports day coming up. Why don't we bring the WNBA over to run a clinic? Why don't we bring the women from the national, the pro soccer league here? All these people are looking forward to the opportunity to teach. And when I tell them, look up what sports day is, look at the Aspire Tower, and Qatar, one of our friends who my wife worked with, who was a friend with the Sheikha, she for a few years was working with, I want to say it's called the Legacy Committee. Yeah. And their goal is, okay, the World Cup is coming, and that's great, and that's wonderful. What are we doing after? Yeah. Like how all the world's eyes are going to be on us. How do we take that and become it? Like Dubai is where all the theme parks are, and they've kind of cornered that market. Qatar is trying to be the spot in the region, maybe worldwide, sports tourism. And so they have this goal of, okay, we have these beautiful stadiums, we have these beautiful roads and transportation system. After everybody goes home, after the fall of 2022, how do we fill these stadiums? How do we get these athletes to come back? What is next for Qatar? And truly, as far as North American, whether it's hockey, I work with the guys in the NHL, whether it's in the NBA, whether it's the NFL, I'm looking forward when I get to bridge the gap of bringing these people over. Because in Qatar, we know there's a want for these people to come here. On my side of the ocean, these talents, be it the actors or the athletes, are looking forward to going over. We're just trying to find the connector to bridge the gap, because there's a need and there's a want. You know what I mean? You're a business guy. There's supply and there's demand. I have the supply. Qatar has the demand.
I think that what we do is we're going to be having talks after this for sure, and there's going to be that nervous energy that's going to go on, and we're going to make something happen without a shadow of a doubt. You have been an absolutely, and I can't believe that the hour has gone so quickly, but you've been an absolutely tremendous guest, and the things that you've done and gone through, and how you're giving back to others from a sporting perspective. You're going around the whole globe, giving troops something that makes them feel less disjointed, that you're taking something to them from their homeland, which is fantastic, and it's phenomenal. So congratulations with that. Congratulations with all your team. This is just a start for you and me, Jack. It's going to be phenomenal. I can't wait to get involved with you, and thanks for coming on the show.
Honestly, I stumbled upon you looking something up, and I started listening to the podcast, and I'm like, I want to be friends with this guy. Like, professional, personally, I'm listening to some of the podcasts that you had, and that's when, again, I wasn't afraid of you. What's the worst you were going to do? What's the worst you were going to do? I don't want to be friends with you. I don't want you on the podcast.
I've got to say that I've got to say that you were kind of, I felt so, because I do tend to, the podcast is my love, really, but sometimes it's the business. You know what it was like when it was through the COVID at the beginning. Everything kind of went out the window. That you had to get used to so many different things and business things. If you didn't perform on a business level, you weren't going to survive at all. So everything was going to be washed away, everything that you could have worked for. So you had to put that hard work in. And I did lose track of your communication, because you were saying, "Oh, come on, please, let me come on your podcast. Come on. Could we have a show?" And I was like, "Yeah, no problems." And then I would always forget it. And then I said, it was just a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, no way, I'm calling this guy. And that's what I did. We got in contact again. You got in contact with me, or I got in contact. And it's been an absolute joy. And I'm hoping that we're going to be friends for the rest of my life anyway, because I want to be your friend. You're doing some tremendous things, and I want to be a part of it.
Well, honestly, it's cliche to say, but it's been a complete honor and pleasure to get to connect with you and to get to do, in the game. So thank you for letting me come on.
That's all I can say is you're brilliant, and keep it up, please, because you're doing a tremendous thing. And as you said, you're going out there and you're making a difference. So thank you so much. You're exactly the type of people that we want to come on the show, and it's been brilliant for me. Thank you so much indeed. Everybody, thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as me, especially if you're a ice hockey fan, because I know that everything that we spoke about today, you're going to be looking up and saying, "I know exactly that. That was exactly the type of person I was." So I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. So again, thank you ever so much for listening, everyone. Until next week, give us a like. Before I go, just make sure you give us a like, give us a comment, just to let us know that you're there. And thanks very much for listening again.
Everyone, thank you for listening. Please send us your feedback on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And don't forget to review us on your favorite podcast app.